Heather Parton, I hope you're well. California, 25% of its total infections have happened in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
What's going on there?
Well, I mean, I can only judge by what I've seen in my own neighborhood. I live in Santa Monica, and I think back. Do you remember? I think it was around Memorial Day. They started to open up California, and there were a bunch of pictures of people lining up. Or no, it was Mother's Day. They were lining up at the flower mart downtown to get flowers for their mothers, and you could see, they're all no social distancing. Everybody was closer together. Well, it's kind of been like that from the moment that they said you could open up. There has been a significant minority of people, if not a majority, who just went, yeah, we're back, baby, and we don't have to worry. And, I saw it in my own neighborhood where people just stopped wearing masks. They had been, and then they just stopped. And I'm thinking, what do you think here? Just because, Eric Garcetti, the mayor, says that we can open up here, that means that the virus has disappeared? What, you nuts? But I really think that that's what happened. And, who knows? I mean, we don't know about the protests. There were a lot of that. We don't know yet how significant that was, if at all. I mean, there's some indications one way or the other. And of course, it's restaurants and bars. I mean, the minute they opened those up, people raced in crowds, shoulder to shoulder, breathing all over each other for hours. And it just stands to reason that there would be a spike the minute that happens. I mean, I don't pretend to understand this. Now, from what I understand in California, I don't know if people really care about California, but I'll give some detail. The major part of the major spikes have come from just 4 counties, suburban counties in Southern California. It's Orange County, Ventura County, Riverside, and San Bernardino, all of which are conservative counties. By comparison to any, it's California, so it's not like it's Alabama or anything, but it's definitely conservative. And Orange County in particular, in fact, they ran off the health commissioner there, the head of the public health agency, with death threats. She's
Right.
Been a half a dozen of them that have had to quit because they've been threatened for giving the bad news, killing the messenger. And she was one of them. And so she quit. And I don't know if you saw, there were some hearings. I heard that you played some of that, very disturbed woman down in Florida, equally disturbed women in Orange County about 2 weeks ago over the mask issue. Same exact thing. Saying this really loony QAnon level conspiracy theory stuff about, and screaming at the top of their lungs about how you will not, I will have my freedom and you're trying to kill me, and, just weird. So there's something in the subculture of the right wing on masks that goes just beyond, hey, I love Donald Trump, and, I'm not going to be a sheeple. I mean, that's part of it, of course. But there's something else too. There's something in the deep, dark, corners of the fever swamp that is saying that this is like, some kind of a conspiracy, and they're trying to kill people. They're trying to kill them and all this, because it's happening in these, in Orange County and in Florida. This can't be a coincidence. They're getting this nonsense from somewhere. So there's that happening, and I don't think it's any mystery as to why Orange County and some of these conservative counties in California are leading the way with the new infections, because they basically they do not want to even acknowledge that this thing is going on. And I think for most of them, I mean, I got to say, I think it's Trump. I mean, I think he is out there pretty much saying it's over, that it was kind of a hoax to begin with, and that, basically this is all a plot to deny him his reelection. And I think a lot of them have bought into that. I mean, you could hear it in Arizona this week when he was down there to give his speech to the megachurch, and they interviewed a bunch of the people in front of there, and that's exactly what they were saying. This is just, this thing is a hoax. You people are hypocritical. the media's, trying to scare everybody. Masks don't work. They make you sick. I mean, all this stuff. So, this is, and of course there was an article in the Washington Post this week that showed that people who listen to Sean Hannity, that his greatest, where his ratings are the highest, is some of the highest infection rates. So, there you have it.
Yeah, I hate to toot my own horn, or tweet my horn. But Brendan, put up this. This is my prediction 3 months ago. It was a picture of Sean Hannity, how right-wing pundits are covering coronavirus. March 11th, in 6 months, someone will create a graphic showing clusters of coronavirus deaths and how they correlate with high Fox News viewership. Fair enough. I was off by 3 months, although I don't think they had a graphic in that Washington Post piece, which basically there are multiple studies now showing this, right? I mean, there's one from University of Chicago, one from Harvard. Now, granted, all elites, egghead elites, who are saying this, but all these studies which show this. I mean, but this is, I'm trying to, everything that we're talking about, right, seems very familiar in the sense that Donald Trump was able, the Republican Party was able to turn on a dime, and all of a sudden deficits are not relevant to them. I mean, that was literally their, the only thing that mattered in terms of their politics in so many respects, right? And they were able to just sort of jettison that. And it was like, wow, they really like Donald Trump. It really only matters what he says. But with something like this, and I think there's some crossover with like anti-vax stuff too. But the anti-vax stuff, it seems to me, is a little bit transpartisan, as it were. At least I always perceived it as being, sort of on the left and the right on some level, right?
It is. Yeah, it is.
But this, I don't know if the anti-vaxxers on this, nominal left, right, left of center, are supportive of this. But this feels like something like it's the pattern's the same, the dynamics the same, but it feels like it's almost different in kind. Because, honestly, like I get being very skeptical of pharmaceutical companies, and I get the idea of like you're injecting something into my body. I can grasp the skepticism, right? And on some level, I don't share it, and I think it's very dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not. But like, what do they think a mask is going to do to them? When a sheriff says you're a sheeple for wearing a mask, like I don't get. Like if I don't know, it's like if we were being attacked by another country, oh, you're building you're I don't know, storing water, or you're fighting the enemy or whatever. Like I'm trying to come up with some type of analogy where it makes sense that they would have such a intense, it's not skepticism, like just an intense reaction to the idea of wearing a mask when you're in public. Like I just don't like it. This seems to be like this, we've crossed over from like fans into really sort of like cultists, haven't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, yes, there is no doubt. In fact, I think on my blog, I put up, the various clips of these people in Orange County and in Florida. And there's another one in Ventura County, a woman dressed in Trump regalia from head to toe, screaming some kind of incoherent nonsense about masks. And, I said, now tell me this isn't a cult, because, it is. You might as well be watching, footage of a Mooney or some member of the Heaven's Gate cult or something. When you see these people saying this stuff, it's like a form of, it feels as if it's some kind of brainwashing, because it doesn't really make any sense. But when you look at it, the anti-science sort of strain on the right has been pretty strong for a long time. I think you can find some correlation. And in fact, from what I understand, some of the people who in the dark corners of the fever swamp who are pushing this idea that the virus is a hoax or that it's, some kind of a plot, whatever that plot is, are among some of the people who are also climate denialists, climate change denialists. There is I think there's a little bit of a through line there on the right with people with climate denialism and COVID denialism. The idea that you cannot trust scientists, that they're all lying to you, that this is a plot to bring you down. And I think Trump has made this pretty explicit, because the idea being that, and he said it out loud, they just want to keep the country closed down forever to deny me re-election. This is the idea that there's a plot, some kind of an alternate agenda, a hidden agenda, with the scientists and with, the sort of concern about the virus, is really something else. I mean, that seems to be something that they believe. As for the specifics on masks, they have developed an entire theory of masks that they're trying to hurt people by making them wear masks, and they will breathe in, their exhale. And this is, they say God made our, they said this in all of them. I don't know where they're getting this, but all these clips, they say the same thing. God made our bodies to breathe the way it breathes. And you're telling me, you're trying to make me, oppose the will of God by making me wear a mask, breathing in my, the exhale. And in fact, I have a Facebook friend, somebody I went to high school with, who, is complete nut. And he's on there saying that any medical person who wears a mask in the course of their treating anyone should have their license removed, because masks are bad no matter what, not just with COVID, not just walking around the street. That he's gone so far as to say that any wearing of a mask is bad, and any medical personnel who use one in any situation are promoting some kind of hidden agenda. I mean, it was very bizarre. I couldn't believe he said it. Well, I could, because he's that crazy. But I mean, this is how far they're going, to sort of, it's deep into this tribal cultist, this rabbit hole that they're down. And I don't see how they can climb out. And unfortunately, with the virus, the problem is that, what is it? They say one person in a crowd can infect 20 people. And so, what do you do about this? I mean, I'm stymied on how cause we have very little in the arsenal to protect people. This is not a perfect solution. Masks are just kind of it's kind of a slapdash thing. We're just hoping that it will help, and it will. The evidence shows that if everybody did it, we could help a great deal. But if these people aren't observing that, they refuse to stop, to socially distance and, do the sort of rudimentary kind of mitigation strategies. We've got a problem. I mean, this is really
we do have, we're there already. I mean, this is the thing, is that you and I have had conversations like this for 15 years, and we talk about, this lunacy or that lunacy on the right, and we've never had such a clear one-to-one causal connection between that lunacy, and to see the sort of the extent of that lunacy and the power of that lunacy. I mean, that lunacy is driving what could very well be a massive catastrophe in Arizona, could very well be a massive catastrophe in Texas, maybe in Florida, maybe in parts of California. And I mean, we're like, this isn't a fringe. This is the, mainstream enough that they have governors of some of the biggest states in the country, doing their bidding, like kowtowing to them, like that sheriff who's up in, Northwest Washington, or, Southwest Washington State, wherever it was, going around like, shake my hand, man. I'm just saying that, you wear a mask, it's sheeple. And here's the other thing, I got news for you folks. God did not make these glasses. or at the very least, I saw the guy, I went to the eye doctor, and, I think they made these at Lens Crafters, and that helps me see. Like, well, I mean, presumably God made the ability of humans to make a mask and know when to wear it and when not to. Like, but I know that's a small point, but I'm just, this is, we've never, I feel like we've never had an example of the lunacy having such a direct and immediate impact, right? Like the lunacy is like, we can measure this in weeks. We can measure this in infections, and I mean, hopefully, maybe not, as many deaths, but I get the sense that the deaths in this situation are, they're a lagging indicator, but I have a feeling that they're going to be even more lagging because of, it's not like the the virus basically says like, well, we've chewed up as many 20, 30-year-olds as we want. We're going to leave the 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds alone. That doesn't happen, right? Like at one point, like we may not have the same measure of commingling between, the 20 to 40 cohort as like, in between like as there is, 20 to 40 may not commingle as much with 50 and 60-year-olds as a 40-year-old will, or a 45-year-old, et cetera, et cetera. But at one point it crosses that divide, and it maybe those folks are more cautious, and maybe they're not in these areas, and then it's Johnny Ball game at that point, right? I mean,
well, we all live in the same country. I mean, whether we like it or not, there's going to be some crossover between the generations. I mean, you can't. I think older people are taking, better precautions now that they know. I mean, I know I am. But compared to the early days when nobody knew what was going on, I think nursing homes are probably being more, cautious and taking precautions. But the truth is that even young people, if they get this thing, it's really a crapshoot. This is a very, very ugly disease. If you get it and you get it bad, and it does happen that, that certain demographics, certain, populations. Here in California, the Latino population is being hit way harder than anybody else. And that's happening. Almost all the deaths among people under the age of 34 have been Latino in this state. And this is it's just a matter of the living situation, the certain health issues that even if you're young, you can be hit hard. And you're an essential worker, you're working at some warehouse, or you're going to you check out groceries or whatever, and you're 25 years old and you can get it too. And I don't think anybody should want anyone to get this thing, because you just don't know how it's going to affect you, and they don't know what the long-term effects are. So I mean, that's just nuts. And even beyond that, look, of course it's a lagging indicator. Like you said, that 25% of California's cases happen in the last 2 weeks. Well, it takes a while for for people to get really sick, then they get into the hospital, then they, go through the whole process, which we observed the horror of it in New York already. So we know exactly what happens. There may be some better treatments, but there's no therapeutic drug. Nobody ingesting bleach isn't going to help you. So, that same thing is going to happen. It just takes a while. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I feel pretty confident that we're going to see the mortality rate rise. And, the president out there, he said last night on Sean Hannity, and tweeted, he's very proud of the mortality rate in the United States. We have a great mortality rate. I mean, we're among the best in the world. It's 125,000 people are dead in the last 4 months. Any leader who would be out there bragging about something like that, as if that is a huge accomplishment and he's done something really great. I mean, it boggled my mind to hear him do that. I thought, he never mentions the dead in any kind of a normal fashion that any leader would, with any empathy, with any sense that there's some kind of great loss going on. 125,000 people. And people, I hear epidemiologists saying, yeah, well, we're looking probably 250,000 could be by the end of the year. And, Trump is out there touting that as a measure of his success. And I find it absolutely, mind-boggling that this guy is, still revered by as many people as he is. And of course, from the polling that we've seen this in the last few days, particularly that New York Times poll, but also, there's been several others that are indicating that he's losing, especially one of his most loyal demographics, which is people over 65. I don't think they appreciate that.
No.
I don't think they appreciate hearing him brag about all the deaths. I really don't, because, it's hitting them and people they know. I mean, if you're over 65, you know somebody who's died probably, or know of somebody who's died. And, I don't think they're not happy about it. I mean, he's actually starting to lose that demographic, which is just, he's screwed.
Yeah.
He's screwed if that happens.
I think that last point, I certainly know of at least two people who have passed who are over the age of 65 from COVID. Mm-hmm. I knew them personally, and I'm not that age, right? I mean, these are friends of my parents. And so I would imagine that's the case across the country, and it certainly will be increasingly. And so the idea that people aren't taking it seriously is going to mean a lot more to people who know about it. I think that's also happening in the Black community. I had a story today. 1 out of 3 Black Americans are aware of someone who died of COVID-19. But you also mentioned, the implications of what happens with kids. There was a story out today in, it was yesterday in Nature magazine, suggesting that there is mounting evidence suggesting that the coronavirus might trigger diabetes, like spontaneous diabetes almost. And there's a whole host. I think, we're not going to know, I think, for quite some time, frankly, the long-term implications of this disease on other people. But I mean, as they grow older, I'm just so amazed at, we've talked about this for a while, the idea that Donald Trump is going to go away, and at least in the context of our relationship with the rest of the world, they would be there. Things aren't going to, immediately snap back. It's going to take a couple of generations, because people are like, you guys elected Donald Trump. Even if you only made him a one-term president, there's still something broken in your country. And this, really, you gotta, the EU is basically going to open up and not invite Americans in. And it is, beyond a rational decision on their part. I mean, we're not even trying as a country. We're not even trying to deal with this pandemic. And it's shocking. Up. And there's a whole host of other things that, the federal government is refusing to help with. I was talking today about school, right now across the country, parents who have kids in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools, they are undoubtedly, like my experience, having taking a survey or reading about potential options for the fall. We may do 3 days on, 2 days off. We may do 2 days on, 2 days off. We may do half day here, half day there. We may do once a week, whatever it is. And this is people have to work. And you're making parents choose if they either parents have no choice, and it's just like, okay, kids, here's the computer. If we're fortunate enough to have one, because a lot of these kids are in families, particularly in the context of New York, but around the country, they don't have the technology that they need. Sometimes the schools are offering it, and sometimes they're not. But they don't necessarily have Wi-Fi. If you don't have a computer, why would you have Wi-Fi? Maybe folks would just, use their phones. The problems range from that to folks who have to make a decision, do I work or do I take care of my kid and make sure that my kid gets a decent education? I mean, you got elementary school kids who are learning the basics, and it's very hard to do online, very hard to do without, and particularly without having someone there the entire time sitting with you and directing that. And if you've got a full-time job, you can't do that. I mean, the myriad of problems here in the federal government is doing nothing. Nothing. It's insanity. It's full on insanity. And
the states aren't doing much either. Ron DeSantis yesterday just signed some school choice bill like that. Yeah, well, we'd like to be able to choose school, but they're, what are you talking about? Why are you doing this right now? So, there is absolute, and I get how each place may need to have, specific solutions specific to their situation. An inner city school isn't going to be the same as a suburban school or a rural school. And there's different requirements for elementary kids and high school kids. And, it's all going to be, very complicated. Let's put it that way. Teachers are all sitting there going, hey, I'd prefer not to die, thanks, and the kids, they need to go to school. I mean, this is a terrible situation. But look, other places who did this right, who managed to find a way, through, solid messaging among everybody, which is really one of the keys, they say. I mean, I read about this all day long. Public health people say, look, one of the keys is, number one, you have to have trust in the people who are telling you things. Most people have to trust what they're hearing, which, of course, in the case of our federal government is impossible because we have the, an incompetent boob running the country who says maybe we should try to drink bleach. So you need that. You need trust, and you need consistent messaging, and you need people saying, the same thing everywhere. This is what you need to do, which, it can even change as you learn more about what's going on in whatever the situation is. You can change whatever. If there's trust there, people will believe that, and they will, they won't think it was a plot or some kind of a mistake or a conspiracy. But we've had none of that. I mean, we've got people, even within the Trump administration, there are now people, saying different things. You've got the president out there saying, we're just going to put out the embers, even though the whole country's on fire at the moment. And then you've got Fauci out there today saying something's gone terribly wrong, and we've got to, try and do something different. So they're talking about doing this, what do they call it, pool testing? Which means that you take a group of, you take 20 people, you take 100 people and you take 20 tests, 5 groups of 20 tests, and you test within that, you test that group of 20 together. If there's no virus in it, then you discard that, and you only, then look more deeply at the where the virus comes up. I may not be understanding that very, very well, but in any case, that's what he's proposing. That we change to that because they're not capturing enough of the cases. It's clear that it's running completely out of control now. In fact, virtually all the states, are starting to cases are increasing. It's not. It's the worst in places like California and Texas and Florida and Arizona, that whole Sun Belt down there, but it's everywhere now. I mean, it's going up everywhere. And even New York is going to have to be very, very careful here because they're showing a very slight uptick. And, people are out again, aren't they?
Well,
and they're starting to, we saw those pictures.
There's two things. There's two things
standing outside drinking together,
we're not going to know the implications, as far as I know, to the extent that there's contact tracing going on in New York. My understanding is that de Blasio, I don't know if this was changed, but the last I heard, they're not going to ask if you were at a protest, right? So we're not going to have a sense of whether or not it is ridiculous, and we're not going to have a sense of whether that contributed to it. But yes, I think there's a lot more sort of like people getting loosey goosey with this stuff. I think we're up in so-called phase 4, or just about to get to phase 4. New York, I think, just about to get to phase 3. The city. The rest of the state, not all of it, but a significant portion of it's phase 4, which is basically the last phase. And I think you should not be allowed to go into any building or store or anywhere without a mask. I get this email from somebody who lives in Central Florida. She said it's a very red town, about 20 minutes outside of Orlando. A few days ago, the mayor of Orange County issued an executive order mandating masks in public places. Since this order was mandated, I've seen the most anti-mask zealots in my community message board post things like, since we all have to wear masks now, does anyone know where I can get a Trump 2020 mask? She said she's giddy to see these type of posts because her daughter is a newly diagnosed diabetic. They've been nervous about going around and no one was wearing masks. She said in the 2 weeks leading up to the executive order, my significant other who would wear a mask was met with aggressive harassment every time he went out. That included being called a pussy, people getting uncomfortably close while asking him why he was wearing a mask, and people literally coughing on him. Just getting groceries and prescriptions had become a harrowing endeavor and source of stress. So they said, she says, mask compliance has gone from about 2% to almost 50%. And so, you don't even have to do too much other than just say, like, you got to do this. And undoubtedly going from 2 to 50% is going to cut down on the transmission. Of course. I mean, of course, it's so basic. I
noticed the same thing in my neighborhood when, like I said, 2 weeks ago, everything was opening up and I was seeing people in restaurants and bars and running around. Nobody was wearing masks, or at least, a lot of people weren't wearing masks. And Newsom, the governor here, he mandated masks now. You can't go out in public without one. And of course, some people are flouting it because what are they going to do? Haul you off to jail? They know that's not going to happen. But I did see a massive increase in people wearing masks again in the last week or so, from where it was 2 weeks ago. So it helps if they say, if the authorities say, hey, you need to do this, some people go, oh, okay, I guess I should. For some reason they can't make that decision on their own and understand the great, voluntarily understand the concept behind it. But when they're told, some people do it. And wear the Trump 2020 mask, wear the I'm a snowflake, whatever it is,
right.
You want to put on your mask, have at it, just wear one.
That's the thing is, I think, I can understand why people, are, reluctant to do it when it hasn't been made official, because there's this presumption of, like, if it really was important, they would tell us to do it. And the president wouldn't be out there saying it doesn't matter. But, well, listen, Digby, we didn't get a chance to talk about what's happening. Joe Biden's, obviously the numbers are going up. I think this coronavirus is definitely a function of it. In places like Georgia and Florida and Texas, I mean, his numbers have gone up since April. And we're seeing numbers now that, like, I think it's unlikely he's going to win in a place like Georgia, although it's possible. Maybe North Carolina, Texas. I think it's unlikely, but the polling is tightening, I think on some level we're getting a better sense that, like, only there's 30 to 35 to 40% of American population who are authoritarian. The irony is they're the sheep, right? Like,
right.
I mean, that's, you're going to listen to this guy who says, don't wear a mask in the face of a pandemic. I got news for you. Look in the mirror if you're looking for the sheep.